Hello everybody, how's it going? Glowplasma231 here. And today I want to talk about Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 30, I think, of 2023. Actually, let me check that. Let's see. Well, would you look at that? It is 30 of 2023, so I was right. Now, last week I did a video detailing all of my thoughts on all of the series I read in Shonen Jump on issue 29, and I sort of liked how that turned out, and I sort of liked talking about the Jump series I don't normally cover on this channel. So I want to do the same exact thing I did last week. Now, this week I read a total of, I think, yes, 15 series. So I am reading about, what's that, 3/4 of everything in the magazine. And again, everything here is going to be my opinion, and I'm probably going to have some wrong ones from what a lot of people think. And as normal, I will go through all of the chapters in the order that I read them initially, and then at a certain point, at the very end, whenever I've talked about all 15 series, I am going to go through and I rank every chapter, every single one, not just like the top 3 and the worst 3, every single one in order, and I also pick a MVP, or most valuable player for the week, the character that I think was the best character that was shown this week, and also just any other notes I have. Again, this is just something I want to do, so bear with me here. So yeah, so to get into it, 6/25/2023 is when these chapters came out here in the States, and to start off, the first thing I read was My Hero Academia, chapter number 392. Now, this was another, I think it's 9 pages, which really just goes to show that no, it's 13 pages, my bad. But still, Horikoshi just needs a break, and this chapter is just really detailing stuff with Toga and how her very sad backstory, and just going towards stuff going on with like Ochako. It looks like she gets stabbed in the end, and all of that just sort of going on. And to be honest, with these chapters just being sort of everywhere all at once, and this confrontation between Toga and Ochako is something I'm not really interested in, it really limits how much I can care about this, and I really just don't care too much about it. The sort of reveal at the end is cool, and I'll talk much more in depth about this chapter whenever I get to the actual My Hero Academia chapter review that goes along with it, but I just didn't really think this chapter was a great one, and it really didn't make me go like, oh man, My Hero Academia chapter, I can't wait to read it, right? But the next chapter was Black Clover, chapter number 363, and here's the thing, I ranked this chapter pretty low in the whole thing of the chapter of the week, but to me, this chapter is much more of a setup chapter. It's just showing Lucius pretty much coming in saying, hey, you guys won't summon us, so I won't let you guys, and then just doing the whole thing with, oh man, Dementio is now a paladin of the Holy Realm and all of that, and he's going to stop the Black Bulls, and the whole thing of Morgan versus Yami. It's just really a setup chapter for things that'll happen soon. And then the Black Bulls spread at the end with Luck Magna, Noct, Gauch, Sora, and Sekre, and I think Gray, and I think we all see Charmy there, and Henry and the big Black Bulls mech. This is really just a setup chapter for, okay, here in the future, whenever we actually get this confrontation, this will be really cool, and I really like the Black Bulls as a team. Zora is probably my favorite character in the series, followed up by Noct, and then Magna, so just seeing all these characters getting ready to do their thing and fight, I just really can't wait for it, and this is really just a big setup chapter for what will happen next time. So that's really all I have to say about Black Clover. Now, the next series was Mashle, Magic and Muscles, and when I say this series is about to end, it has got to be getting close. This is also chapter number 161, where pretty much, yeah, the confrontation is over. One really interesting thing is that, well, look at that, Mash sort of talks to Innocent Zero, and Innocent Zero uses a spell that rewinds the entire sort of plan around him and brings everybody back from the dead. Orler's back alive, Domina, probably my favorite character in the series, is back alive, and all of the Divine Visionaries and all of just the people who've lost their lives are all here, and it's just a really cool just seeing all these people, like even it looks like all of the brothers are back alive now, and even the big, like, ogre dude and demon-looking guy who fought him before, everybody's back, right? It's a nice happy ending that Mashal was always going to have. So it's really just nice. Also knows that Mash's heart's back, and really it's just a confrontation between the two of them, and then just some comedy at the end is Mash thanks everybody, and we do literally see everybody that the series has known. We see his dad, Brad Coleman, and the guy who always gets his shirt ripped off. We see the people that threatened, I think it was Dot in the woods during that sort of mini arc. We see all of the Mash's friends, all of the sort of reformed villains throughout the series, all of the Magna Lupus, and just everybody important. And then there's a really funny joke where Dot's just like, here's the thing, I did 90% of the heavy lifting, as Mash just sort of looks away, and we see all the Divine Visionaries are just doing perfectly fine. And at the end of the chapter, we get the whole thing of Mash is going to become a Divine Visionary, and it's just really awesome. It's really nice to see Mash will wrap up this way, and I know that next week in issue 31, Mashal is supposedly going into its super climax, which is probably going to be where the end of the series really starts, because for like series like Dr. Stone and Demon Slayer and Promised Neverland, at the end of the series, a few chapters before, they always get like a 25-page extension, or an extension to 25 pages, and Mashal is supposedly supposed to be getting that. So next week we'll probably get something with Mash, and maybe another Calamity will begin or something, and Mash will just go punch it in the face, and that will be that. So just a really good Mashal chapter, and yeah, the series is almost done, and to be honest, I am really happy to see it. The next series I read was Undead Unluck, and when I tell you that I just was a fine chapter, one that I enjoyed, but not to the lengths that some of the art chapters this week I enjoyed, this was an overall good chapter. It really just showed Shin sort of going through the motions in the fighting tournament that Fuko and everybody set him up for. This is chapter 164, by the way. And just going through all of that until eventually Fuko goes up to question Shin about, or not Shin, oh man, what's his name? Oh, it's not Shin, it's his master. I'm blanking on the name right now, but I know it whenever. Fing, that's, I knew I had to get it eventually, right? But she pretty much goes up and asks Fing to protect, Mei, I think. Yeah, it's his sister Mei, and Mui is the negator who inherits the ability on later, right? And pretty much we just get stuff that Fuko wants Fing to protect Mei, because she will probably be the one who triggers the terms in this series, the tragedy that's going to end up happening with Shin. And eventually we learn that Mui is also fighting in the tournament, and we just get a really cool visual of Mui just fighting really well. And we see that, yes, Mui will probably be the source of the tragedy, so what's changed between this loop and the previous one. So yeah, it's really interesting, and I really do like Mui and Shin as a character, so it's going to be really interesting to see how the two of these work together and how this all gets resolved. And in Undead Unluck fashion, it probably won't be too long until we get to that conclusion. Next series I read was Ichinose's Family's Deadly Sins, and as always, this chapter was just a trip. We're on chapter 30 now, and just to be honest, it's so surprising that we're already 30 chapters into this series. Granted, I haven't been reading it for all of that long. I think, let me go to the spreadsheet. I started reading it a few weeks before Tenmaku. It looks like in the tail end of March is when I started reading it. It was like 17 or 18 chapters in. And yeah, it's just crazy, the series is 30 chapters already, and just the whole thing of Tsubasa thinking back and thinking about his older brother Shota, and that's who Shota is, and Shota mysteriously disappears because, you know, everybody wants him to take pictures with his camera, what is passion, and just how sort of really messed up all of that is when they break his camera, and Tsubasa and Shiori are just like, what's going on here? And at the end, the grandma just coming on and being like, how did I forget the 7th room in the house? It's just like, such a trip, and you're just like, what the fuck is going on here? It's just like, oh my goodness. So yeah, it's just really interesting, all of that, and I'm gonna be interested to see where it goes from here, but altogether, not a bad chapter, just one that, like all chapters, is just so confusing, and I feel like Ichiro's His Family Deadly Sins is definitely going to be better on a binge read, just because of how weird and all the convoluted plot lines that you get in it. It's just really interesting. The next series I read was actually the new one this week, which is Ice Head Gill. And boy, when I say this was an interesting series this week. So of course it's the first chapter, so for the first chapter I tried to open up and be honest with what I think about it, and there have been many weeks in which I think the first chapter of the series is so good that I gave it my character of the week and even a chapter of the week, but this one is a little weird. It seems like the pacing is really off. We meet our main character, Gil Soul, and the Lich is what the chapter's called for chapter 1, and we learned about how this kid's dad was like really good at wielding an axe and so on and so forth, and he betrayed the kingdom itself, and through time things went on and he got washed up to this island, and it's very fantasy and medieval bases. The idea of liches come up, and also trolls at the end of it, and it's just an interesting series, and it really tries to be funny with jokes about like tax evasion and that sort of thing going on in this kingdom, all to sort of try to wrap it up into something that's really nice, where, oh, the grandma's just trying to get weapons to help protect the village whenever things, or whenever shit hits the fan, and, oh, eventually this guy washes up on the shore, and, oh no, Gil beats him with an axe in one swing, but the guy comes back as a lich, and he goes and kills one of the guys who was speaking up earlier, and he turns that guy into the lich, so then Gil has to murder him, and he stops all the townspeople from murdering other people, and it's just very convoluted, and to be honest, it's not really my sort of style of series, and well, I'll see where it goes in the next 2 chapters. I'll be talking about it for the next 2, but yeah, it's interesting to see where all this fantasy goes, and I'm not really a fan of the main character's design. It's just not sort of my style, but yeah, he sails out on a Viking ship in the end to go to the royal capital as we get the Legend of the Liches spiel, and it's just interesting enough. I'm not too excited for the next chapter, and I know that this has sort of been trying to be hype up for a series for a while now, but I'm not really too into it. But the next chapter that I read was really one of my favorite ones that I ever read thus far, and it was Martial Master Asumi. And it was the second chapter of that, and when I say this was just a really funny, comedy-filled chapter, it really was. It's chapter 2, and it really starts off with Asumi just getting beat by his grandpa and all that stuff going on. And eventually Asumi goes to school where he talks to his friend, I think his name's Fuya or something like that. And they eventually just talk about the Okabe girl from yesterday, and all of the bullies were just sitting off to the back of the classroom after Asumi did beat the crap out of them. And Fuba pretty much just goes and talks about how cool Okiba is and all of that stuff. And they just go back and forth about how they think Okiba's into Asumi, and it's just a really funny joke when they just keep going back and forth about it, and they're talking about it, and then Okiba just appears behind Asumi as he just jumps up a few feet into the air, and it's just a really funny build-up to a joke and all of that, and just going and talking through it, how Okabe just wants to fight Asumi, and just going back and forth there, and eventually get to the MMA shop, where we meet, Yoshitoki Oiba, the dad of Okiba, and it's just going through, and it's just a really funny joke where they just keep going back and forth between Asumi and Yoshitoki, just going back and forth, and eventually they get into a fighting match with each other after Asumi ends up saying something he probably shouldn't have, and they just start to fight, and eventually we just see that Asumi pulls off a really good martial move to just go and kill the guy, and we learned he's like a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Asumi's just like, I'm screwed, but he learns what he learned from his grandpa against the guy, and does a TK scissor move, and the guy sort of just gets screwed over, and at the end of the chapter, it's just a really funny joke of where the dad's just like, I thought he would spend the whole time running, and oh my gosh, this is great. As Sui's is like, hey, can I call a timeout because he's stuck in his shirt, and we see all of his rippling abs and muscles, as the dad's just like, good idea, I'm starting fresh myself, right? And Sumi's just like, oh no, I think I just made him even madder. So it's just a really funny payoff to the joke. And just to go and spoil, this was my number 3 chapter of the week. I thought this was a great chapter, and if it keeps up this level of just funny while also being cool, I'm definitely going to be into reading it for a while longer. And next is, of course, Tenmaku Cinema, being that it was the newest of the sort of new batch of series. And like My Hero Academia, I'm going to try to restrain what I'm talking about fully with it, because I want to save that for the review I eventually do of it. This is chapter 11, and just to go through it very briefly, it's just really about how Kurai and Shinichi are becoming really good friends, and how the director of the actual film just sort of sees a script and there's a bunch of jokes about, oh no, as long as Kurai's not in the movie, it'll be fine, when of course she is. So it's just a really nice and heartwarming chapter between both Kurai and Hajime going through here, and eventually just a whole joke that Bito has to end up playing the lead role, and it's just a really good chapter altogether, and one that I'm not going to complain about at all. It was definitely one of the best chapters of the week. Next chapter after that was Kill Blue, and we're on chapter 10 of this series, and again, this is a really interesting chapter because this series always seems to be building up to something, and while almost all the chapters are one-offs, this chapter does seem to have a level of, alright, well from now on, more interesting things are going to happen, because in the chapter, it's just really brought up that midterms are starting, and Otagami has to study for the exams, and he enjoys studying, so whenever he gets home, he just keeps doing it constantly, and eventually as they go through, whenever he gets back to his own place, he's talking with the cat dude, and they're just going through, and eventually he goes to a place that they all refer to as Mama's Place, and this is sort of just like a bar down in the nightlife area of Tokyo, as Otagami's a little child here, and he goes in, and for some reason Norin found him and just started following him around, as he goes in there, and oh look at this, Otagami's ex-wife walks in, and it's just an interesting thing, it's a conversation between the two of them, and just going through all of it. And eventually they just talk about how Otagami was in the past, sort of giving us more insight into the assassin job that he once held. And eventually Nora seems to walk down and just like, what kind of dude is Otagami really? Because he can't be my age. It's just going through a bit. And she sort of makes a connection at the end of the chapter after Otagami sort of looks at his exams and enjoys that he did decent. I mean, he didn't do great, but he did alright. And he's just like, and Norin's just like, Otagami was never normal to begin with, was he? And he's like, it's not that he's weird to battle, it's more that he reminds me way too much of my uncle and my dad for someone his age, right? She's like, is he really a middle schooler? So really, I still am enjoying Kill Blue and intend to continue reading it. And it was just a fine chapter about it, but a very interesting one for how it built up the plot and introduced a new sort of area into this series. Next was Nue's Exorcist, which, as always, was a perfect train wreck. Pretty much the confrontation between the one exorcist girl and Nue comes on, and Gakuro's just stuck in the middle going, oh no, what's going on here? And as they go through it, eventually gets into a video game championship, where eventually they're just sitting down, and it's just really stupid jokes about how this other exorcist lady just gets way too close to Gakuro, and Gakuro sort of isn't ready for it, and eventually they steal in each other's lap to play this video game better, and it's just so stupid and just incredibly stupid. And eventually we learn that, oh, look at this lady also uses a spirit contract just like Nue and Gakuro, and they go to get ready to fight, and oh, look at that, who would believe it? It's just such a train wreck of a series, and it's almost something you can't turn away your eyes from because it's so much of a mess. But that was Nue's Exorcist. Obviously the worst chapter of the week, objectively just terrible. Next was Fabricant 100, in which it's more of the carnival stuff going on between oh man, Ashibi. Yep, Ashibi is the name. And the brother of the girl they're trying to find. I also forget his name, but maybe I'll learn in due time. But let me see if I can't find the girl's name. Ayako is a girl's name they're trying to find, and Ayako's brother's here, and they get just some shenanigans here in the fair and carnival as they go through to find her. And there's obviously the place where she would be, because they're talking about how fabricants will probably want to test people before they actually get to them. So a place where they can obviously see people. And it's a whole joke that there's this big carnival place where pretty much there's a bunch of hard trials that they have to do. And as they're walking in, Ashibi says something to Ayako's brother, and they sort of get in a little bit of a tussle there. But as they're going through, it's just all of these stupid little challenges, like a rock climbing wall and a laser room where they've got to dodge all the lasers. So it's just that sort of really stupid thing, and a bunch of cages with a case in them that you got to find the right one. So it's sort of just that sort of thing. And eventually they get through it, and there's a window where somebody looks through to see somebody, and who would be in there but Ayako. And the brother just comes in with a sword and starts to stab her, as we see where Ashibi and Fabricant 100 are, and they're in another mirror room. And as they come into it, somebody can obviously see them from there, and there's another Ayako in there, and this Ayako says, "Help me." So is this a real one or is this a fake one? Did the brother kill the real one or the fake one? So it's really just that thing of, we don't know what is what yet. And I think this is a really good chapter in like retrospect and looking at it, but you really need the next chapter to sort of see the fallout of this and the next stage of the plot. So if I had to guess, I'm guessing that this one who says "help me" probably isn't the real one, or it could be the real one, but there's an art fabricant in the room that's also there. But at this point, we don't really know, and it'll just be waiting to see where it actually falls. Next series was Akane Banashi, and this series really built up the good rivalry between both Hikaru and Akane, as we see Hikaru just going through and doing her Rakugo performances. This is chapter 67. I don't think I've been mentioning chapter numbers for a little while here, but this is chapter 67. And as we go through it, we just see really everything going on as Hikaru is using her voice actor thing to talk through the story, and it's just a lot of narration going about it. So she just keeps doing that and all of the jokes to go with it, and eventually it's where Hikaru is talking with her sort of manager about how she just really wants to be Akane at her craft, and that's the whole thing where they do it. And yeah, it's just a really cool rivalry build up between the two, and that's really all I can say about it. And at the end of the chapter, it's just a really nice note where Hikaru is really happy about how her performance did, and she sort of gets a smile, and we see Kagurashi, who is streaming her whole performance, and he's just like, you know, your photo book could have used a smile like that. Just a really cool note to end off on, as yeah, Akane's up next, and is she going to be able to top Hikaru's performance, or will Hikaru win this spot? We obviously, Akane is sort of the plot armor aspect, but who really knows? The next chapter then was Blue Box, which was just again a really wholesome chapter about Taiki and Chinatsu going out and all that sort of thing. And it was really just built up as a chapter of the two of them talking. A really nice cover page spread to start off the beginning of it, but where they both eat in the secluded lunchroom because nobody else is there, and they ended up trying to talk throughout the day, but eventually it culminates in them eating in the lunchroom. And yeah, eventually Chinatsu is tired, so she ends up going to sleep, and Taiki catches her before her head falls on the ground, and Taiki is just like, man, I need to work even harder. And it was a fine chapter, and that's really all there is to it. Just, this is probably going to be the norm, just get some chapters like this before some actual plot kicks in, because I'm sure that some plot will actually kick in here sort of soon, because it's just how sort of Blue Box works, and whenever that happens, I'm going to be excited for it. But not as excited as I am for the next chapter and what it means for going forward, because the next chapter I read was The Elusive Samurai, chapter number 115. And this was a really good chapter. It sort of is getting back to the actual form of the series, where there's no more intermission. It's just Toko Yuki in the beginning, really good color page also, And he is, I think it's 1337 now, so 2 years after the whole Nakasendai War happened. And pretty much Tokoyuki ends up sending a letter to Emperor Go-Daigo, and Go-Daigo sort of reminisces on all of this with how Kusunoki did everything, and they're just talking about it, and eventually we see that Tokoyuki is sort of going back and forth with his retainers to do some stuff, and they're all eating out and just having a fun time being all the kids that they saw, and there's just some fun jokes going through it. But as they're talking of everything, we see Gimba at the end of the chapter sort of just go into his little hut, which even has some cat ears on it, which is just really funny. And we see that Gimba goes down to sit and look at his books, and an assassin is in the room to sort of kill him, and Gimba's just like, give it up, you don't ever learn. As we see, we'll eventually learn this girl's name, and it is Natsu. This is the girl who was with the Sinu doll, who was sort of Gimba's it was a Tengu Sinu doll or whatever, and it was sort of Gimba's rival during the whole build up to the Nakasendai War sort of thing. As they just go to fight each other, and there's just jokes about how they may just need to work together because Gimba needs to buy some bombs at a market in Kyo, and he's got one more left, and he makes a mark about how Kojiro and Hayako develop skills, so he's got to step up and make some skills of his own, so when Tokoyuki gets ready to flee again, he'll get things going to be really interesting. And this is just a really good chapter, because I'm excited to see where this goes from here. Gimba's always a character that I have really liked, and just to know that in the future we're going to be getting Gimba development, and also this shinobi was sort of his rival may also sort of be working with Gimba. Yeah, I'm sort of excited to see where it goes, and if we get like 2 or 3 chapters which are just focused solely on Gimba, I'll be fine with that, because we really haven't had a Gimba-based chapter in what almost feels like from when the series began and Gimba got introduced. It really seemed to focus on everybody else but him, because he's always sort of been in the background. Yeah, I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I really debated giving Gimba my character of the week, but I'm probably guessing that he'll probably shine way more in the coming weeks, so I'll wait for them to give it to him. But then the last chapter I read this week was Witch Watch, and what a chapter of Witch Watch this was. Pretty much, just to go through it, actually let me open it up, chapter number 114, so it's actually closing in to where Elusive Samurai is, surprisingly enough. But pretty much it's starting to be the whole confrontation between everybody. We start off with Nimbu sort of Googling some stuff, and we see that there's no way that this other witch could have known about something that she asked Nimue. So Nimue sort of realizes what's going on, and she'll probably be there to save the whole crew here in no time. But before all this happens, there's just a whole thing with Nico and Kumogi, I think her name was. So she's a warlock now, and this chapter really just sets up that she's waited her whole life for this moment to trap Nimue. And there's going to be a whole lot of confrontations between all of the familiars and all of the sort of people that we sort of got to look at throughout the series, everybody who sort of messed up in a way, as we see that we're going to get sort of conclusion to the fight against Samoy and Iran. So it's the Ogre versus the Undying Wish, Tengu versus Dreamweaver Witch, Werewolf versus the Earthshaper Witch, and the Vampire versus the Blink Witch, as we just see that everybody sort of has a rival through here, and they're going to be fighting. So I'm honestly really excited for this. I love Witch Watch, and I'm really interested to see what this will culminate to in the end, as we see this as being of the Day of Disaster arc. So yeah, I'm really interested in it, and just knowing all the setup that went into this, yeah, Kena Shinohara is a really good author, and yeah, I'm excited for it. So with that, that was all the series I read this week. That took a lot longer than I expected, but hey, that's all it is to it. Just to go through what I ranked everything this week, obviously, I think the best chapter this week was Witch Watch, for that amazing reveal at the end of the Day of the Disasters now going to start fighting. So really great chapter. Next was Tenmaku Cinema, which again was really funny. And just to go and talk about it now, Kurai was my MVP of the week, so I thought she was just a really good character all around, and one that I really enjoyed seeing how she evolved through the chapter of Tenmaku Cinema. Next up was Martial Master Sumi, because I thought it was a really good series. And then just to go through the rest of them, because I don't have really amazing thoughts on them besides for Elusive Samurai. Next was Elusive Samurai, Kill Blue, Mashal, Blue Box, Undead Luck, Akane Banashi, Fabrica 100, Ichinose Families, Deadly Sins, Black Clover, My Hero Academia, Ice Head Gil, and Nue's Exorcist. I don't think My Hero, Ice Head Gil, and Nue's Exorcist really weren't good at all this week. It just, not great chapters. Of course, Nue's Exorcist is never supposed to be a good chapter. It's always just supposed to be stupid and bad, but it's just how it was. Now, to get into the wrap-up, thank you everybody for watching this. And if you want to sort of see my thoughts early and maybe not have to watch a video like this, I actually put all these thoughts up on Twitter, because it's a thing in my Discord server where I also post them all up, but I also posted them all up on Twitter also after the fact. So if you sort of want to see my thoughts early on all of this, join the Discord server, link in the description. Go check out the Twitter, links in the description. And also, yeah, thank you for watching. If you like this video or think my opinions are wrong with some of these series, put something in the comments or just put subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. And I don't have much else to say. This was a really good weekend Jump, or a decent week at Jump. Not the best week we've ever had, but still a good week for Jump. And yeah, with that, this has been my review of Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 30 of 2023. And yeah, this is going to be Glowplasma231 out.